The man sensed danger and quickly aimed his gun. He widened his eyes in fear, thinking something terrible was hidden in the bushes. The man walked forward and found only a few cute little bears in the bushes. He breathed a sigh of relief, but before he could react, he was directly knocked away by the grizzly bear that was ambushing behind him and fell heavily to the ground. The man was shocked. He never expected the mother bear to use her cub as bait to get his attention. The man had no chance to escape from the adult grizzly bear, which weighed hundreds of kilograms and had sharp teeth and claws. He was pinned to the ground by the grizzly bear like a rag doll. He fought back and struck the grizzly bear. The grizzly bear with angry eyes was so eager to protect its cub that it ignored the minor injury. Seeing the grizzly bear so fierce, the man had to give up resistance temporarily. He endured the severe pain and struggled to turn over and lie face down on the ground to avoid important parts. The grizzly bear's powerful move seriously injured the man, causing him to scream. This made the bear more excited, leading it to bite and swing his cotton shirt crazily. The man was thrown around and the screams stopped suddenly. He collapsed and remained still. He wanted to pretend to be dead to trick the grizzly bear, but the brutal grizzly bear was not easily fooled. It raised its huge paw and stepped heavily on the man's head. The man had a splitting headache, but he still closed his eyes and clenched his teeth tightly, not daring to make a sound. Fortunately, the soil in the forest was soft. Otherwise, this blow would have killed him. When the grizzly bear saw that the man was motionless, it lost its appetite. After the bear left, the man struggled to prop up his upper body and crawled away with difficulty. His back was bloody and his waist was injured. He couldn't stand up. Surprisingly, the man didn't flee hastily. Instead, he picked up the musket on the ground with a grin. He trembled all over and used all his strength to hold the gun body and pointed it at the turtle bear that was patrolling not far away. He pulled the trigger. The injured turtle bear became more ferocious and brutal. He waved his claws and cut the man's throat. The man couldn't scream as the turtle bear didn't let him breathe or have a ribbon. The bite quickly gnawed him all over, leaving not a single piece of good meat. Despite his injuries, the man did not give up. He pulled out his dagger and raised his head desperately, staring at the grizzly bear with provocation in his eyes. The grizzly bear had never seen such a fearless human being, so it fell into rage again and rushed forward with a sword step, wanting to tear it apart completely. The man used up his last bit of strength and desperately swung the dagger at the heart of the grizzly bear. The man and the bear rolled down the hillside in silence. The teammates found this place following the sound of gunfire. The man lay on the ground, covered in blood. Despite everyone's efforts to bandage him, the injury was too severe to be cured. The severity of the injury was beyond everyone's expectation. Even the experienced team doctor was helpless and could only sew the man's broken flesh together like sewing rags. However, seeing such a miserable scene, teammate Tom seemed very impatient. It was impossible to have such an injury in the deep mountains and old forests. It's better to use a bullet to free the man as soon as possible than to waste everyone's time. When the captain said this, he was so angry that he trembled all over. He immediately ordered everyone to camp here tonight and wait for the man to stabilize before setting off. But by the next day, the man's condition not only did not improve, but became more serious. On the way, he suddenly developed a high fever and fell into a semi-comatose state. It seemed that he couldn't hold on any longer. The team is being pursued by Indians. Further delay will lead to disastrous consequences. The captain can only make a decision helplessly. He offered a reward of $3,000 in the hope that someone can stay with the man until the last moment and bury him decently. Tom, looking impatient, heard about the money and offered to stay with the man's son. Before departing, the captain reiterated that Tom must remain with the man until the last moment. Tom solemnly nodded in agreement. But as soon as the captain left, he began digging a pit, fearing that the Indians would catch up and endanger his life. He planned to bury the man now and then go back to claim the reward. Unexpectedly, after he finished digging the pit, he found that the man who had just been in a coma with a high fever had woken up. His bright and energetic eyes made him look far from being a dying person. Tom was surprised, but wasted no time in running away. Hesitantly covered the man's mouth and nose, trying to suffocate him to death. Unexpectedly, at this moment, the man's son rushed over and knocked Tom to the ground, then pointed his gun at him and forced him to stay away from his father. Tom ruthlessly took the rifle from the boy when he wasn't paying attention, pressed him against a tree, and stabbed him. The man on the rack was furious and heartbroken as he witnessed his son's death, but he was tightly tied up with ropes and unable to move. His throat was injured, preventing him from cursing. He only watched as Tom dragged his son away. His teeth were almost broken. He kept roaring like a wild beast in anger and despair, but that was not the end. Tom dragged the man into a shallow pit after hiding the body, getting ready to bury him alive. Tom deliberately exposed the man's head to wild beasts by slipping out to the street halfway through the burial, which was infuriating. Surprisingly, after one night, the man not only survived but also managed to free himself from the rope with incredible determination, and then slowly crawled out of the hole using his hands. He struggled to find his son's body and gently rested his head on his son's stiff and cold chest. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out, wanted to shout, but no sound came out, and could only bleed silently in his heart. Although he was nearly disabled at this time, the man was determined to avenge his son with his own hands. After grieving, the man picked himself up. Before seeking revenge, he must find a way to survive in the cold and dangerous wilderness. To recharge, the man followed the smell and found a gnawed cow bone. He broke the cow bone, shivered as he dug out the smelly marrow, then stuffed it into his mouth and chewed it voraciously. Although it tasted bad, at least it could be kept secret. Then the man climbed to the riverside again, eager to drink some water. He still had a large hole in his throat. When he swallowed the water, it came out of the hole with blood, almost choking him. If he continued like this, he might have died of thirst before he could get his revenge. So the man made a bold decision. He poured gunpowder on his hand and carefully stuffed it into the wound. Then he took out the flint and lit the hay. Finally, he used a stick to pick up the spark and ignited the gunpowder on the wound. With a puff of light smoke, the wound on the man's throat was instantly charred and tightly closed. But such intense pain also made him faint completely. When the man woke up again, he found that it was already pitch black, so he had to light a bonfire in the cracks of the rocks at the dark side and fell into a deep sleep. The man was pleasantly surprised to find that his stiff legs had recovered some intuition after a night. He leaned on the dead branches and took a step, but after a few steps, his feet slipped and he fell heavily to the ground. The man was very weak and wanted to lie here for a while, but when he thought of his enemy still living happily, he had endless strength again. Soon the man got up from the ground and searched for tree roots on the riverbank to fill his stomach. After eating, he wrote Tom's name on the bank with stones to remind himself never to forget it. Suddenly, the man heard a sound of horse hooves. He raised his head nervously. In order to save his life, the man quickly took up his kettle and hid in the cold river. He hid behind a rock, but the handwriting on the ground exposed his whereabouts. The Indian soon discovered that he had nowhere to hide and had to turn around and dive in. The swift, deep river allowed the man to dive in and avoid the Indian arrows and spears. Unfortunately, when he surfaced, he found endless waterfalls in front of him. The turbulent water soon made the man dizzy. Luckily, his thick clothes saved him from drowning. He clung to a piece of driftwood and managed to climb to the shore. Although he wasn't drowned, the cold weather was worse than the rapids. The man was completely wet. If he didn't find a way to keep warm, he would be frozen to death here in a few minutes. He rapidly started a fire to cool the wet water. The wound on his shoulder began to inflame and fester from being soaked in water. The man was a little anxious. If he continued like this, he might not be able to hold on for much longer. He couldn't do anything. There was no hospital in the wilderness. No matter how serious the injury, he had to endure for revenge. The man woke up to a fire at night. He followed it and climbed the hillside. He saw someone using fire to scare off wild wolves and took a yak that had just been killed by the wolf. The starving man quickly got up and walked over to share some meat, but unexpectedly, as soon as he got close, he raised his bow and arrow. The man was startled and quickly lay on the ground, gesturing with his hands that he had no ill intentions and just wanted food. The humble man was thrown a piece of dirty, blood-stained raw beef liver with disdain. The man couldn't bear the test, so he quickly grabbed the beef liver and bit off a large piece and chewed it. But the next second, the strong smell of blood made him retch uncontrollably, and he immediately threw the beef liver away. He looked at the scene with contempt in his eyes, as if mocking the man's cowardice. But what she didn't expect was that the man quickly grabbed the liver again and ate it bite by bite. She raised her head and looked at the man fearlessly, like a starving wolf defending its right to survive in a desperate situation. The man's ferocity won him respect. The next day, the man not only used herbs to help her heal her wounds, but also took the initiative to invite her to go with him. Now the man no longer had to worry about being starved to death. It wouldn't be long before she could walk out of the wilderness and start her revenge plan. The man was suddenly awakened by the sound of horse hooves that morning, ending the good times. She was dazed. When he opened his eyes, the Indian tribe that was chasing him had actually caught up with him. The man had no time to think, so he jumped on the horse and fled. Despite his quick reaction, he couldn't escape the large number of pursuers. He was soon chased to the cliff's edge and fell without time to react. Luckily, Linzili's vitality was strong, and the man quickly woke up without serious injury. However, the precious horse was not so lucky and fell to death on the rock on the spot. To make matters worse, a white-haired wind suddenly blew in the woods, indicating that a snowstorm was coming. To avoid freezing to death, the man opened the horse's belly, removed its internal organs, and then crawled inside to stay warm using the horse's residual heat. Although this method is cruel, it is the only way to survive. After one night, the sun rose again and the blizzard finally subsided. The man got out of the horse's belly, put on his clothes again, and limped away. He traveled during the day and hid in a snow cave to rest at night and always reminded himself not to forget the name of the enemy. God bless, it didn't take long for the man to successfully meet the patrol team. The members were dumbfounded and couldn't believe that he was still alive. However, when they returned to the base, the man found that Tom knew that he couldn't hide the matter and had already slipped away to Dodgy. The captain was very angry and promised that when he recovered, they would go together to catch Tom. Unexpectedly, the man rejected the captain's kindness and insisted on, after going through the hardships of the wilderness alone, he is no longer the sorrowful father, but a hungry, cunning, and deadly lone wolf.